Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, registered dietitian and intuitive eating counselor. And today I have Chana Radcliffe. Hi, Chana. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah.
Thank you
Uh,
so much
thank you.
for coming on. So nice.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Of course. So could you just tell the listeners, where do you live and what do you do?
I live in Toronto, Canada, and I'm in full-time private practice as a psychologist. I write books on family life. I'm a writer for Mishpacha magazine, weekly columnist. I speak, I Zoom, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah,
A lot of different things.
a lot
So
of.
did you always know that you wanted to be a therapist / writer?
Um, I think as a child, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I want to write. But no, I never wanted to be a psychologist. That was not on my to-do list.
No.
Yeah. No,
And
it kind of evolved. Yeah.
I think I heard you on another podcast say that you are originally a speech therapist, or you were a
I originally wanted to be a speach therapist. I actually
Mhm.
studied psycholinguistics, and my interest was in reading and thinking and writing and whatever. Yeah, it evolved. That other podcast kind of tells the whole story of that
Yeah,
journey.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can put that in the show notes also if people want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Into that. So
Mhm.
today's topic, I really wanted to delve into like your experience and your thoughts on people who come to you. Not specifically about body image, but when we were talking a few weeks ago before we were like recording today, you were saying that like me as a dietitian, I talk a lot about body image and a lot about people struggling with their weight and things like that, struggling to accept their body. And I know you said that's not something that you directly work with, but that it definitely comes up. So I wanted to know if you could go there, like what are the common themes that you see with your clients, and um, like just anything that you wanted to share in terms of like tips, tools, also really like why you think that like comes up so often.
Right. So when I said I don't directly deal with it, I think of two parts to eating issues. So there's only one part that I don't deal with, which I'll mention in a minute, and then I do deal with the other part, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
So of the two parts, there's a body and mind part kind of to eating disorders. So there's the science of how food is processed biologically in different biological systems and different bodies and stuff. So somebody might want help with actual diet or something like what they should eat or how much they should eat or when they should eat. I mean, somebody might want that. I don't ever do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the part I don't do. But the part that I do is the psychological part of the relationship we have with ourselves and with food. And that does come up in general counseling all the time because it just seems to be that body image and the way we look and the way we feel physically and the way we feel about ourselves is just a very common issue that people struggle with. So that's how that comes up.
Mm-hmm. I was actually just thinking before, like, do you think that like 100 years ago or like 500 years ago, people struggled so much with the way that they looked? Because now we have like mirrors everywhere and we have social media, but like, and I feel like everyone I speak to is like, I don't think I know any woman who loves the way that they look, basically.
I know. It's so sad.
It's so sad. So I
Yeah.
wonder.
Yeah. I don't know about 500 years ago because I haven't done any research on if that was the case 500 years ago and I wasn't around then. So I have no idea. But you're right about today's world. Like it's the visual is become so painfully obvious all over the place. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's worse probably than it was before because of that. But it might always have been bad. I think that women have a thing about being attractive kind of built into their systems. So it could be that um, self-consciousness about the way they look might be part of a feature of being a woman for all we
Mhm.
know. I don't really know.
Mhm. But do
I
you
think
think,
more men are concerned now than they used to be
right?
because with the same social media is kind of surrounding mirrors, as you say, issue. Men are getting to be more like women in this department.
Right. So when this comes up with like your clients, what's like your main tool to help people work on their body image?
There won't be a main tool, but I'll talk about some of the things and some of the ways that it can come up and what we might do about it. One of the common ways the whole issue of weight comes up is when we're dealing with life stress and emotional stress, period.
Hmm.
A lot of people have used food as comfort for their emotional stress, and they may have learned to do this way back in childhood.
Hmm.
Um, there's simple things like growing up in a household that's very food oriented and stuff. That's a different issue. Okay, but this particular one probably is the most common way it comes up in my practice, which is about how we'll develop. It's a form of addiction in the sense that we can alter our mood and our stress levels by the chemistry of food. So
Hmm.
salty foods do it one way, and sugary foods do it another way, and fatty foods do it another way. Um, so some people have their preferences about that depending on their type of biological stress. Okay,
Hmm.
but it is pretty much like any drug in that sense, or any other addictive habit that we might develop in response to the desire, not conscious desire, but the underlying desire, or even maybe even the need to soothe emotional distress and pain. Now, um, a person who's, let's say, has complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a situation that arises out of um, 2 decades growing up, developmental stress, basically, where a child would be living in a dysfunctional or abusive or troubled household of some kind. And the child needs to continue to function, to go to school, to grow up, to make friends, to have a life. So there's a lot of energy that has to be kind of walled off in
Hmm.
order for the child to have energy to do that. So the walling off process is something that is built into a child's nervous system, the capacity to dissociate from whatever struggles are going on. And when I mean struggles, it could be things like sexual abuse or physical abuse or emotional abuse, but it could be just more normal or common stresses like illness in the family, or a special needs child in the family, or very overwhelmed parents, or parents who are kind of emotionally overwhelmed or physically overwhelmed or financially overwhelmed, whatever kind of problems they have. Or could be family that's struggling with marital problems, divorce. I mean, it's almost everybody because it's
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
We have, fortunately, in a child's nervous system, they have automatic ways of taking this material and putting it aside, sometimes for a long time, decades, so that we can just go to school, grow up, make friends, and continue on with our developmental course. But inside, like, things are kind of falling apart. So
Hmm.
we have a child who is maybe behaviorally acting out. That's one, defense. Or a child who is always anxious. That's another kind of hypervigilant response to that
Hmm.
stress. Or a child who's spacey and numb and doesn't know what's going on. That's another kind of thing. But the whole addictive department of addictive habits of all kinds is a pretty common route to go.
Hmm.
And the thing is, if a child develops that, so many things happen then that roll over into adulthood. So if you think of my client who comes to me with marriage problems or personal mood issues or high anxiety, that individual may have been born with a genetic predisposition to this low mood, high anxiety,
Hmm.
difficulty, and or one or the other, was in a family that was stressed. And again, most families are stressed because life is stressful. So there's
Right.
some stress.
Right.
And yeah. And then the child realizes, learns early that something like food can be helpful, to improving his coping abilities when he's little. And then he's practicing that coping mechanism for 2 decades. So it gets
Hmm.
very weird into the brain as a
Hmm.
go-to automatic, unthinking, and pretty well subconscious response. And so now the person's, maybe my client, age 35 or 45, and 100 pounds or 200 pounds overweight. Um, and talking about life, not necessarily food, right? Like
Mhm.
they didn't come to me as a dietitian or anything. They came to
Mhm.
me with their stress.
Right.
But and when you talk about stress, or even when you cure stress, the consequences of all that wiring and all the biological changes that happen in a body that's being overfed or underfed or in any other way
Mhm.
mistreated,
Mhm.
um, they need their own treatment for the body part of it. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's like, okay, now I've worked out, I went to therapy, I worked out all the issues, and my weight just melted away. Like
Mhm.
that would be great.
Mhm.
But that's not what tends to happen. There'd be a shift in what the person can now do because so much more energy is freed up. They can now address the legacy of their weight,
Mhm.
their but if they had developed an overeating style because of stress. Okay, now that's just one, like in a clinical practice, that's a common way how an eating thing will be brought forward or brought up. It's like unwanted weight that came as an emotional defense. Okay. That's
I
so
have would you say that that's like somebody would come to you and they would be like talking about their stress and not talking about their eating at all, and and you would see that that's like the common theme, or they would say like, and also as an aside, I can't, I'm eating a whole box of cookies every night.
um, what tends to happen. There's the kind of client who walks in and right away they want to deal with their weight, and they'll say that at the first session. But there's another type of client who, like, for example, a client will come and say, look, my problem is that now, I've put this weight on, I can't take it off, I'm not happy about it. I want this therapy to help me with that. That's what they came
Mhm.
for.
Right.
There's some clients like that. Um, but there's a whole other group of people who they came to talk about their marriage, to talk about their overwhelm, their anxiety, or their mood. They never mention their weight, even though they have excess weight. It's not presented as one of their issues. Okay? But when we do therapy, usually what happens is after some period of work that we've done in therapy, then that person will say, um, you know, I'm tired of being overweight. Like they're now kind of ready to get to their weight issue because
Mhm.
it's like we cleared a path in
Mhm.
all the things that bother them, and then it'll come up. That's a pretty common pattern that one.
Mhm.
It's like,
Mhm.
I didn't even know the person was overweight. Sometimes I do telephone
Mhm.
counseling and I don't even meet the person, and
Mhm.
I have no idea that they're overweight. And a year later, they're saying like, so like, this 100 pounds I have, I'd like to lose it. I
Mhm.
didn't know they have
Mhm.
pounds, right?
Mhm.
But that can happen um, as they become healthier and they realize they don't need to be soothing themselves anymore that way.
Mhm. And the thing that you said that was really interesting is that a lot of things that you said, but the thing that you said
Mm.
about, like, let's say a child is predisposed to being anxious or low mood, right? And then they grow up in a stressful situation, but you also said most people do. So,
Yeah.
right, most people do. So is that like most people are destined to have this like need, like, come up with some sort of soothing technique, let's say using food or something else, unless, let's say, the parents teach them how to cope? Like, how do people grow up like functioning properly? That's always my question.
And that's right on. That question's a good question because everybody does need coping mechanisms, even, on a minor scale. Let's say our circadian rhythm in the body goes up and down like a wave during the day. And there's times when we have high energy and we're focused and we're ready. And there's times when we're
Mhm.
kind of dipping and we're draggy and
Mhm.
maybe even irritable. And we tend to self-medicate all day long with things like coffee or
Yep.
sugar treat or so that's just to even out our mood. Okay. And then the whole thing of teaching a child stress management. Well, if a child grows up in a household where she sees her parents meditating regularly, there's a sign on the door, don't bother mommy, she's meditating for the next 15 minutes. And that's how the kid grows up,
Mhm.
or sees the parents doing yoga. Yeah. Sees the parents going for therapy, sees the parents writing in their journal, sees all these self-help books lying around the house, like that's the culture the child grows up in. So the child knows that we address stress psychologically, physically. The parent says things like, I'm going for my run. And there's the pathological run, which is like the pathological eating, or there's the healthy run, which is it's part of my exercise routine.
Mhm.
The one is addictive and compulsive and meant to shut everything up inside. And the other one is healthy exercise, just like there's, a good way to eat to nourish our bodies.
Mhm.
And one that's trying to soothe emotions. That's different.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if a child grows up surrounded by parents who model tremendously good stress management skills, then that really helps the child, especially like in a household where parents are talking about those things, just not only modeling them, but talking about the stuff that they do. Or, oh, I've got had such a rough day. I'm going to put some lavender oil on right now. Oh gosh, that feels so much better. That's great. Okay.
Mhm.
In that household versus, dad's had a hard day or mom's had a hard day and they bring up the bottle of wine
Mhm.
to make things better. Right.
Mhm.
So kids are always watching and learning. Well, what do the parents do? If the parents do nothing, the kid will learn from his teenage friends and young adult friends that drugs and alcohol, cutting, starving, these things are popular among
Mhm.
that age group. Um, so it is up to parents to have a good routine for stress management themselves, which includes superficial things like herbal teas. And um, it's not that it's superficial in the sense it's not deep healing, okay? Like
Mhm.
it's on the surface of calming the nervous system. But calming the nervous system is a very important skill for all of us to have.
Right.
So the essential oils and the herbal teas and the Bach flower remedies and the different kinds of things we can take to ease our stress and ease the way for us to, be productive and healthy and happy. And the deeper things when we need it. Like I said, like kids should know about therapy and that, or whatever deep meditation, whatever it is that the parent does to access deeper levels of renewal and healing and refreshment and so on.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's education.
Yeah. Do you think it's getting better, like in the world? I feel like you said before, most people grow up in a stressful home, and I guess I mean from what I see in my own clients, like most people didn't grow up with like the coping mechanisms. That's why I always say like food, you have to eat, so you don't have to do drugs and you don't have to drink alcohol, right, to live, but you have to eat. So if food is the only thing you have around, and the whole, like, I know you talk a lot about IFS, like the IFS model, like if it's there to protect you, like the food is, like you said, children need to have those coping mechanisms if they can't deal with what's going on and they don't have the better tools.
Yes, because we will find a tool. That's why
Mhm.
it's so important for parents, even to use as parents, to use a tool, not just for modeling, but
Mhm.
to help out with emotional management, the tool of emotional coaching. That is simply naming children's feelings
Mhm.
is so, so important because an unnamed feeling is more likely to be a feeling that becomes overwhelming on the inside and needs to be silenced, stuffed down, whether you
Mhm.
have to cut yourself to do it or pull out
Mhm.
all your hair to do it or
Mhm.
go to jail to do it, however you have to do it. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, an overwhelming feeling is just overpowers the system. Whereas a parent who says a name for even a very intense feeling is like using a key that opens the door of a cage and that feeling can float out of your heart. So even if the parent says, I can see how desperate you are. If desperate's a pretty big feeling, but
Yeah.
it's never, once you give it a word, it's already shrunk down to the container, the
Mhm.
size of that word. Okay.
Mhm.
But without it, it's this black, endless waterfall that never stops falling. It's like a pit in the universe. It's like, it's horrible. You
Yeah.
need the word. So
Right.
for parents to learn the skill of emotional coaching is very, very helpful for preventing the need for the less healthy coping mechanisms. And a
Mhm.
kid can name her own feelings as she's writing it out in a journal now. Okay, I feel desperate. Okay, we do it ourselves.
Right.
We're bringing it down to a manageable level.
Wow. That's so powerful. Um, so I was gonna say before about in terms of using food to cope, and that's what people learn to use. And we were talking about body image, and we were also talking about like um, women feeling really badly about themselves in today's culture. I don't know if you know anything about the intuitive eating model, but basically the first principle is to reject the diet mentality. And the thing that you said about like running, like using running as meditative versus like stuffing everything down. So like in terms of like the model that I use with my clients is that like yes, you might have used food to cope since you were like a little child and that was the only thing that you had, but also like almost like thanking the food, like saying thank you to the food for like being there when you needed it, and like now finding better coping mechanisms, or like because we were talking about before, like the world at large is like most women don't like the way that they look, and there is like we are kind of like conditioned to believe that like if you tried hard enough, meaning like in terms of dieting, like if you tried hard enough, you could be a size 2 or you could be a size 4, right? But but actually I think I just read that the average American woman is a size 14, but like the average model is like a size 2 or 4. So
Well, they're
um
changing
yeah,
that.
they are changing that, but
Yeah,
I'm saying like that like also the research from intuitive eating says that food isn't like chemically addictive like drugs and alcohol, but the pattern of using food is addictive. And you could use, instead of using food, you could use, I mean, it takes time, but you could find other healthy coping mechanisms, and that so for some people, thinking that they're addicted to food is like more detrimental because they think of it as like
you're right.
drug.
They're addicted to the pattern of soothing that way. You know,
Right,
yeah.
right. So I like the reason why I was so drawn to the intuitive eating model is also because it's very like there's so much like self-compassion and there's so much body acceptance. Not to say that I think people hear about it and they think like that we're throwing away health and we're throwing away like nutrition and not thinking about that. Not at all. There's definitely that component, but it's much more like like realizing where did this coping mechanism come from, and what were you trying to soothe when you were 5, and how did that come to be, and like what are other coping mechanisms that you could use. And even when you stop using food to cope, sometimes people don't even lose weight because um there's people do have a set point weight range, or they have a certain body type that they're meant to be, and yo-yo dieting slows down people's metabolism, so like things like that. Like I think that that's also really important that people work on, like the fact that you can be beautiful at any size, and that you could work on body acceptance or body love. Like I think that that's like so important.
Yes, I, it's true. What you're saying is true. It's I think that that's where your expertise would be, different than somebody like mine, because the
Mhm.
that discussion, um, like the self-hatred or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
yeah, um, is covered in a broader sense. I think in therapy, like it doesn't quite come up that way, in the context of therapy that I do, um, but just like plain, just except when we have something called body dysmorphic disorder, and
Right,
then that's the whole name of the game.
right.
Where yeah, um, but I like the idea that um, we need to broaden our concept um, about beauty. I'm just thinking of like the fact that this has been taken up by the public market, and um, I know I get what do you call it, the Land's End catalog. Received it for 4 decades or something in my mailbox, and it's certainly different now than it used to be in terms of what they're putting out there as nice looking people. So they have
Mhm,
people of every size. They have some
mhm,
skinny, they have some, size 14s, and they have some, people who are way past size 14. And our eyes are getting used to this. Even the Barbie dolls, came in this,
mhm,
yeah,
mhm,
changing. And this is so healthy for us to go like, hey, real people look like this, right?
mhm, mhm,
We're just real people and we can be so beautiful. But self-love is a deep concept, and you can't easily just talk at somebody and tell them, uh, you need to just appreciate how beautiful you are, let's say at any size or whatever it is, or to love yourself at any size, because the parts inside of us that are having trouble doing that are deeper than the cultural messages and images. They're really deep. Like, because
mhm,
yeah, when people even the cultural images don't disturb like a healthy person's sense of being okay.
Yeah.
But most of us don't have that. It's not that most women are self-hating in their bodies. Most people are self-hating at, a lot of different levels. Like they're
Right.
just, it's very, yeah. So once we get rid of that whole pattern of self-rejection, then this gets scooped up in it as well. That
Yeah.
those traits that compassion and so on, but installed at a very deep level inside the different parts of us that hold rejection, for who we are,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. When you said like self-hatred or self-rejection, that's like, it's so, it's such a painful, like, such painful words to even like hear that. And I know like that's something like I struggle with, or I know that that's something that my clients struggle with. And I don't want to say like how do you like remedy that, but like how, like, what is a path to heal? How do you know that you're getting better with self-hatred, or how do you know that, like, how do you start to heal?
I mean, the parts models of psychology are particularly helpful with this. I mean, there's definitely not going to be like a one answer to that, because
Hmm.
we're going to do a lot of different things. But I like to look at our psyche in the parts model. Now, there's many different parts models. You may have heard of, Freud's superego, ego, and id, or transactional analysis, parent, adult, child, or IFS, and the firefighters, managers, and exiles, and whatever. Um, there's the trauma models, though, which I'm favoring. The TIST model, I don't know if you've heard of it, which is the trauma-informed stabilization therapies of Janina Fisher. Her stuff, to me, is phenomenal. But all of these models, and a model that I've been using myself, based on my work, which is very similar to everybody else's models, but we all have our little differences. Um, so, anyways, in all of these models, if we could simplify or collapse them into a bus model where there's a bus driver. So there's a bus seat, never mind a driver, there's a seat, okay, and it's empty. And then there's a barrier between the seat and the passenger side of the bus, and then the passenger side. We could think of it as having many different types of passengers on that bus. And then on top of the bus, there's a witness that can look down and see, well, who's in the driver's seat today? And, where's the bus going? So when you get like a nice adult part in the driver's seat, then that part takes care of the whole bus and makes sure that the bus arrives at its destination. That adult part would know where it wants to go. Like, I want to go to California. Here's my road map. I'm going to take this road and that road. I'm going to end up in California. Okay.
Hmm.
We find that when a child part pushes the driver out, the adult driver, and takes that wheel, then the bus inevitably crashes because child parts are too young to drive, and it doesn't get anywhere near California. It's going onto the Atlantic Ocean. It's going the other. And we can tell, the witness can tell from watching that bus crash, who's been driving. So, we want to make sure that the part that is most often in the driver's seat, except when we're playing with our kids and playing with our grandchildren, all that stuff, we want to make sure that the part is an adult that is taking us to our overall destination, which means that it can hear a child part cry, in the passenger section. A child part is hurting, is upset, is overwhelmed, is confused, is being rejected, is hurting, and is crying. But instead of allowing that child part to get into the driver's seat, because whoever's in the driver's seat has the ability to steer that wheel. We put the key in the ignition, we steer the wheel, and we go where we're going. So if it's, and that means that that person has control of the body. Okay, so that person can do the thinking, that person can do the feeling, that person can do the speaking, that person can move the body. That person can reach out and grab some potato chips and or cookies or whatever it is and stuff them down the face if it's a child in the driver's seat. So what we need is for the adult who hears the crying to organize for a babysitter, a therapist, a nurturing mother, some kind of helper person who's also a passenger, to come and hold and rock that baby so I can drive my bus. You know what I mean? That this is Using this model, we can actually do a lot of kind of reorganization of the inner world and help ourselves while some parts are hurting. And we need to help ourselves basically unblend, because when we use the word I to describe ourselves, like I'm having a horrible day. Okay, I'm just going to have a tub of ice cream right now. That way of thinking prevents the helping of all the different parts that actually need to help. Okay, so we want to. It's about organizing the inner family.
So interesting. It's such a good visual. Okay. Thank you so much for everything that you shared today. And I'm sure that we could talk for like hours on this topic. I know that you have to go, but
well, if people are interested, I do a weekly webinar on this stuff, on everything, through the Family Circle on at Jewish workshops. It's called the Family Circle. You can find it on my daily parenting post website in the shopping section. There's a lot of things there, but if you look at the Family Circle, that's one way to talk about it literally for hours and hours and ever and ever, because every week we can.
How else can people find you? You're on Instagram. What's your name there?
Yeah, they can look up my website, chanaradcliffe.com. They can find me on Facebook. They can certainly sign up and, encounter me 4 days a week on daily parenting posts at the dailyparentingpost.com website. There's just a sign up page there. And Instagram, we said Facebook. I have a little bit on Pinterest, but I'm not that active there. But yeah, I'm around.
Okay, great. I'll put all your information in the show notes so people can find you that way.
Terrific. Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. This was great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.